the first inaugural episode of Coffee Talk Conspiracy. I'm your host, Ralphie, and I'm joined tonight by my co-hosts, who will be introducing themselves.
I'm your reptilian baby boy. My name is Justin. I'll be here with you guys.
I am your avid Bigfoot believer here. My name is Brett. Not as weird as the next guy to introduce
He looks like
himself.
Bigfoot as well.
No, I look more like a vampire, if you ask some people, but...
Nosferatu.
This is the Booty Bandit Bennett here.
Well, that's true.
Well,
You do. I finally managed to leave my cave. Been playing World of Warcraft for like 6 months straight. It's been taking over my life, but now I'm leaving my house and actually hanging out with people. Feels nice.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that Bennett is bad at Smash, and he lost to Isabel multiple times. Just to put that out there.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that the best character on Smash has to be what's her name? The Wii Fit trainer, the female one though.
No,
You can combo the shit out of her.
Yeah, she's actually pretty good. She's pretty powerful.
Most underrated Smash character, though, is definitely Baby Bowser. Just throwing that out there.
I'd say Keel here is probably the most underrated.
Speaking of Smash...
Speaking of Smash, tonight we're going to be talking about a truly smashing story, and
Adjective.
really one of the most notorious aviation mysteries of all time. Sorry, Amelia. And it's also one of the most expensive searches for a single object or item in history. And it's a story that's entirely plagued by poor communication, and that, of course, is the disappearance of the Malaysian Airlines flight MH370.
Very mysterious.
Yes. Still to this day, missing off the face of the earth for more than 4 years now, nearly 5, this coming March. Start off a couple of facts for y'all tonight. This is a flight that was supposed to be leaving Kuala Lumpur International Airport on March 8th, 2014, destined for Beijing.
Already 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Wow.
nearly 5
Yeah, it's
years.
been a while.
Yeah. It was a Boeing 777 2H6ER, serial number 28420. 11 years of clean history. And it's got 2 Rolls-Royce engines, which I bring up for some fun facts later on in the story. So keep that in mind. They were supposed to make 2 flights daily between Kuala Lumpur and Beijing, with a standard flight time of 5 hours 34 minutes. In this particular case, MH370 was loaded with 7 hours and 41 minutes of fuel. And is scheduled to leave at 35 minutes past midnight on March 8th, with an arrival time of 6:30 a.m. in Beijing. It was captained by 53-year-old Zahir Ahmad Shah and his co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid.
Wow.
I
Kudos on that
just want to
pronunciation.
ask, how many times did you practice that before
Yeah, did you stand in the mirror and just keep repeating that?
An embarrassing amount of practice went into those names,
Wow.
I'd like to admit.
Good job.
The captain, Zahiri, joined Malaysian Airlines as a cadet pilot in 1981 and has over 18,000 flight hours. So really an experienced pilot with a long service record with the company. And his co-pilot, Farik, joined in 2007 as a cadet pilot and had nearly 3,000 flight hours. So both fairly experienced pilots who've been in the industry and with that airline for a while. On this particular case, the airline was loaded with 239 souls, including 227 passengers, and the rest staff and crew, flight attendants, etc., etc. Initially, this flight took off late, and then was headed northeast out of Kuala Lumpur over the Gulf of Thailand. Fun fact, I've also flown out of Kuala Lumpur. Unfortunately, it was nowhere near as exciting as this flight.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
We'll see. Shortly after takeoff at 1:07 a.m., the ACARS system sent its last transmission. The ACARS system stands for Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System. Now that's going to be in charge of sending its specific GPS to Malaysian Airlines. Shortly after that, at 1:19 a.m., Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control communicated to the aircraft, essentially signing off for the night and telling them to transition to the Vietnamese airspace and to their air traffic control. They said, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9er, good night. And Captain Zahira immediately replied, good night, Malaysian 370. Now I'm going to stop there and point out something that's quite interesting to me, is that typically in the aviation industry, the pilot will repeat instructions given back to them. So the pilot should have responded, good night, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9er, where they did not. He just said, good night, peace, see you later.
Kind of shrugged it off.
Yeah, which is, the first little eerie bit of news in this story.
A little sketchiness there.
Little sketch, yeah.
Okay.
Foreshadowing.
Probably had a lot on his mind, to be honest.
You know what? He probably was thinking about a lot.
Yeah.
Just 2 minutes later, from signing off Malaysian airspace, right before they were supposed to be entering that Vietnamese airspace and contacting the Ho Chi Minh, the transponder on board the aircraft was turned off and was therefore lost to all civilian radar. Now, that's, again, another little spoopy thing, because most signs point to that being turned off, on purpose, not an accident, not from a fire or power outage or what have you. Someone intentionally switched this transponder off. And like I said, this was lost to all civilian radar. However, military radar, specifically the Malaysian Air Force, was still tracking MH370. So once invisible to that civilian radar, the jet began to bank right, and then slowly bank left again, and was then heading back towards the Malaysian peninsula, away from Vietnam and away from its destination of Beijing, and then flew along the Thai-Malay border. People like to think that this was, again, intentional and done by the pilot to try and escape either Thai or Malay military from tracking them.
That makes sense.
However, the whole time, the Malaysian Air Force was still tracking this aircraft. So after flying over across the Malaysian peninsula again, the jet reached the other side of the peninsula and reached Penang Island, where Captain Zahira was from. Once reaching the airspace above the island, the aircraft began to bank left, and then slowly began to bank right, and slowly turning more and more banking right, until they were out over the Strait of Malacca between Indonesia and Malaysia. And again, I'll stop and point out something kind of funky here. For the longest time, people thought it was weird that he would bank left and then start banking right hard so much. And they finally theorized that he was banking left to tip the left wingtip down so he could look out of the cockpit and get a look of Penang Island, where he was born and raised. And people think that was kind of like the last, hats off, see you later, hometown. It's been a good run.
Interesting.
Once flying over the Strait of Malacca, the jet begins leaving the Malaysian military's reach, and just as it begins to do that, they see the jet starting to bank left again around the northern tip of Indonesia. So they are now completely invisible to both civilian and military eyes, and so no one really knows where they're going anymore. However, the Rolls-Royce engines were still being tracked by satellite. So Rolls-Royce basically has all their engines reporting data, so they can analyze performance. So every hour, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 was still reporting to a GPS and was still sending those signals. So the aircraft was still able to be tracked that whole time. And it eventually ended up flying for another 5 to 6 hours south past Indonesia into the Indian Ocean, eventually far west of Perth, Australia.
Interesting. I didn't even know it went that far.
Yeah, very, very far. So now at this point, you have people in Beijing, families, business partners, etc., waiting for this plane to land, and time is ticking by. It's like, oh, they're supposed to be here like 15 minutes ago. They're late. No one knows where they are. It's now an hour past, and they're like, oh my god, like, where's this plane? It's not here.
It's starting to panic.
People start looking into it, and at the beginning I said that this is really a story about miscommunication and lack of communication, and this whole time no one was really checking in on this plane. Ho Chi Minh, ATC, they were supposed to be expecting this plane to be checking in with them, never came, they never did anything about it. This plane, was completely lost to all civilian radar, no one really said anything, flew back over the Malaysian peninsula and was tracked by the military radar, and they never said anything, which blows my mind, because you'd think in America or the United Kingdom or something, you'd have a jet.
That'd be a big deal.
Yeah, you'd have a jet on that
like,
fucker
what the fuck is going on?
like a minute.
Yeah.
But here, everyone's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's interesting that it managed to go one way, back the other way, and then completely the wrong direction in one way. And yeah, you're right.
No one said a thing about
Nobody
it.
batted an eye.
Yeah.
Wow.
Insane.
Yeah.
So, not until this plane is an hour past when it's supposed to land do people really start asking questions, and finally the Malaysian government starts looking into it and does something, and they just come out and have a news conference, and they just flat out say, we lost this airplane.
It's gone.
Which-
With everyone on it.
Which you'd think,
Right.
which you think in the year of our Lord 2014 is something that is just not possible. How can you lose an
Right.
airplane in this day and age? It's just insane. And so they start their SAR, their search and rescue operations and missions, but again, Malaysia is just so lost in this. They start the search in the South China Sea, which is nowhere near where the plane is actually at.
Do you know why did they start there? Why did they choose?
Just the negligence of the Malaysian Royal Air Force.
Yeah,
They
just-
just flat out did not share the information that they had been tracking this aircraft.
Right. That's pretty shady.
And they withheld that information for 4 days.
While everyone's families are freaking out, wondering where they
Yes,
right, of course.
and these governments from around the world, America, China, Australia are spending all this money and resources and manpower searching in the completely wrong location for 4 full days. When that information finally comes out and shared to them, they have to then move all of their operations that they mobilized in the South China Sea all the way to the South Indian Ocean, which then took 10 days to move all of those
Of
resources
course,
there.
And by then, everybody is in bad condition. There's no way that they can stay on the high seas if the pilot didn't nosedive the plane
Oh,
to
yeah.
begin
Right.
with.
If they, yeah.
Of course, and not to mention there were 2 cyclones in the South Indian Ocean in that 10-day period.
Okay. Just to add.
So just to add insult to
Add
injury,
food,
salt
like
the
a
wound.
Lot lost right here, man. There's like
Yeah.
Maybe they're
Crash
chilling
on
with
the
Roanoke.
island.
Roanoke. Yeah. There you go.
So yeah, I mean, but when this search and rescue did start in the South China Sea, it's kind of funny because they're fanning out across the ocean looking for a downed aircraft, but this jet is still flying in the air on another side of the world. So, and meanwhile, these engines are still uploading all this data to Inmarsat, which is this UK company, hourly. So at 8:19 a.m. And keep in mind that this aircraft was supposed to land at 6:30 a.m. So, almost 2 hours after they were supposed to land, still flying in the air. And keep in mind they only have 7.5 hours of fuel. So
Right.
they're really they take off at 35 minutes after midnight. They have 7.5 hours of fuel. You're doing the math. It's already almost 8:30. There's not much time left for them.
Yeah, they're at the end of the rope.
Exactly. So at 8:19 a.m., Inmarsat satellite company receives their last contact with the jet, but this one is different than the previous ones. Previous ones were just flat out like raw data. Engines are operating at this efficiency, etc.
Right.
This one, however, is different, and it's a login request, which most likely means that there was a power failure aboard the aircraft, and this is most likely due as the aircraft is cycling power. Due to loss of fuel. So most likely this is when the aircraft has finally reached its end and is now out of fuel. At this point, doing the math, the aircraft's been in the air for 7 hours and 38 minutes, and it was loaded with 7 hours and 41 minutes of fuel. Makes sense that this is at 9:15, Inmarsat sends out a status request, which then went unanswered. So sometime between 8:19 and 9:15, the aircraft went down. And like I said, this is somewhere a couple thousand miles west of Perth, Australia. And that was the last anyone had ever heard or seen of the aircraft until July 15th. More than a year later, where a flaperon was found, which floated ashore at Reunion Island, which is east of Madagascar. Right. And this was huge, because this is really the first kind of like break in the case that anyone had got, like I said, in over a year. So everyone freaked out about this, like, oh my god, like, we actually have a piece of information now that can be tied back to this missing aircraft. But it really was more startling than anything else, because analyzing this flaperon, they were able to see that the trailing half had been eroded and almost like ripped apart. And experts theorize that this is due to, as the aircraft was landing in the ocean, the flaps were tracted down and were being dragged across the water and then being ripped off. So what this means is that the aircraft did not simply run out of fuel and then just nosedive into the ocean. And for two reasons we can kind of see this is one, if this happened, there would be like millions of little bits and pieces that would have been easier to find, because this would have just been an explosion of parts, and this flaperon would not be so well intact. And so what this means is that someone was still unconscious, or someone was still conscious on board that aircraft who did like a manned landing in the ocean, which was meant to keep the aircraft in one piece, and then I would imagine have it sink to the bottom of the ocean, never to be seen ever again.
Well, I mean, if the fuselage didn't take too much damage, it could have stayed afloat for at least long enough to get everyone off board and onto safety rafts. If it didn't nosedive, which, I mean, if it landed safely or safe enough, there should have at least been some survivors on the high seas somewhere.
Right. Well, with probably the rapid depressurization of the aircraft, I assume almost everybody was probably,
more than likely, all of the passengers had been knocked out for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah,
as soon as the transponder was turned off, I'm sure the captain depressurized, for all the passengers, and we're all knocked out, and it was just him, conscious and alone on that aircraft. Because
alone with his thoughts.
If you got 7 hours on board, you see the plane banking and turning and going back. If people were on board, I think they would have tried to breach the cockpit. They would have had their phones and would try to call for help. Something would have happened. I'm sure they were, incapacitated.
If he was planning this, which it does sound like, that would be a good idea. Knock everyone out.
Exactly.
But if he planned to do that, why would he go for a safe landing? Why would he go through the extra effort to not just take the plane straight down and end it? Why drag it on? Why make people escape route?
It's easier to hide one large piece than a million tiny pieces.
Well, if he didn't care, why would he try and hide it to begin with?
I think his goal is he never wanted anyone to find the wreckage ever. He didn't want anyone to know what actually happened.
Well, he succeeded.
Do we know anything about this guy's history of
Yeah, they did over 170 character interviews
Yeah.
on him, and they said that nothing was sinister was found about him. No one really thought anything was weird or bizarre.
No mental health issues.
No one thought he was suicidal. No money issues. Nothing
No
like
mentioned
that.
outside terrorist organizations.
No.
Damn.
Interesting. Just needed to get that one last look at, what was it, Pootie Tang Island? Is that what it was?
Penang.
Close enough. I'd go there one last trip too.
It doesn't make sense why he would just go off the deep end and not only kill everyone on board, but himself without wanting people to know what happened. That's just a very strange occurrence.
To me, that sounds like deep-rooted, some like depression. Just to the point where you don't care. You don't care about people knowing. You don't care about things happening like that. You just want it to be over.
And this isn't the first time that pilots have committed mass murder. There's Germanwings flight 9525, Mozambique flight 470, Silk Air flight 185, Egypt flight 990. This is not unfortunately this is not a new occurrence where these individuals want a way out and they decide to make it a horrific murder or massacre really. But finding that flaperon, despite it confirming that this aircraft did crash in the Indian Ocean, it opened up so many new doors and questions.
Of course. I actually read something about how somebody was saying how easy it would be to create a fake flaperon and not necessarily plant it there, but that's it. Just really just fake it and spark something.
There are plenty of wacky theories like that. One being the Malaysian Airlines flight that was shot down just a few months after this. Really not a good year for Malaysian. That somehow this missing Malaysian Airlines flight 370 was then taken, somehow repainted and taken to the Netherlands, reboarded with new passengers, and somehow hiding all the old ones, and then flown over the Ukraine, was then shot down.
Somehow nobody would have noticed
at
all.
No.
Well, they didn't notice anything go wrong with the first time, so who
That's
knows?
true.
Who knows?
Really a poor year for Malaysian Airlines, though. After this, the company went under and it needed to be renationalized by the country. Despite my objections with some friends that I was exploring Southeast Asia this year, I did unfortunately fly on Malaysian Airlines. So
sometimes you have to risk it for the biscuits.
That's right.
Better in Delta, probably.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Delta.
Airlines didn't kill your puppy.
No, just my whole
But
family.
they did kill your family.
Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting.
I mean, you fly like Southwest and it's like the ghetto bus with wings, man. It's just some sketchy people on Southwest,
But did you die?
I mean, you don't know if they died.
So
it could have, if you landed correctly, people could get off.
Yeah. My question is, what do you think was going through the pilot's head? Do you think he had a motive? Do you think it was connected to something mental? Do you think he just...
That's just another, added layer to the story where you really can't track down a motive of why he would want to do this. Why have a perfect record for nearly 3 decades flying with this company and then just decide to end it all and murder people? And that's what makes me question if he actually did do it, because it just seems so strange and out of the place.
Yeah, it could have been anybody on the flight. Could have been inner sabotage. Could have been some sort of inside job. Who knows? This is all just speculation.
And people, some people do stand firmly with it. It was a mechanical error, but
Nobody turns off a transponder by accident.
I mean, maybe there was a power surge. Maybe there was a fire on board, knocked out, the transponder and all that stuff.
Would have called or something.
Yeah.
If there's a fire on board.
You would think so.
Maybe the communications were damaged in the fire, and he turned around to try and land it again.
Think back to 9/11, all those calls and things that were coming off of the airplanes that were hijacked. If a fire happened in the 21st century on an aircraft, someone's calling in and saying, saying something happened. Like
That's why it's so crazy that there was not a single peak
Yeah.
from anything
And
or anyone.
nobody noticed for so long.
Mhm.
did the plane have Wi-Fi on it?
That is a question I can't
Yeah.
answer. I don't know. But it
Did anyone on the plane have Facebook? I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg could hunt him down. And,
Oh yeah, Zuckerberg can do anything.
yeah.
Our reptilian overlord.
Speaking of passengers on board, though, one of the theories was that this was kind of an Al-Qaeda, ISIS terrorist kind of thing, as there were two undocumented Iranians using fake passports. And that was a theory that a lot of people went with initially, saying, "Oh, this is hijacked. These two did it. These two were the killers."
Gotta be it.
But in reality, these passports that they were using, these fake passports, were actually made for them as they were asylum seekers, and they were headed to the European Union after making it to China, and they were seeking refuge as they were political refugees, leaving and fleeing Iran.
Ah, but if they were political refugees, someone from Iran might have wanted them dead.
It's true.
No, that's.
That could have been a very particular assassination.
Yeah, you never know, man. There's always government cover-ups. There's
Kinda.
always people.
And that would actually fit the narrative because they wouldn't want them to find out what happened to them. They just want them to disappear.
Mhm.
Did the
As
You got a
pilot,
good point there.
refugees.
the pilot of the jet, did he have like a family?
He had a wife, yeah.
Did he hate his wife?
Have we read anything about his wife? Has his wife said anything about the flight? I'm sure she had to be interviewed or something.
Yeah, when
or
you start
something.
getting into stuff like that, it's hard to really trust what you believe on the internet. Some people say, his wife was cheating on him. She was about to leave him. She was taking his money, things like that. But none of that's ever really been confirmed. So so people might just be making that up, or that's just stories that people hear,
Right.
just to try and and find answers. Really, yeah.
But do we have anything that she had said to the public at all, or was she pretty silent about it? As far as we know?
No, not his wife. No,
Not his wife. Interesting.
There were a number of occurrences where the family members of the victims were speaking out, and they're saying, "Oh, I know my husband's still alive. I know he's on there," stuff like that. And unfortunately, a lot of these victims were targets of just like cruel internet pranks. Good old 4chan was basically making up these elaborate pranks and scams, saying like,
I remember that.
I'm your
Yeah,
husband, I'm trapped on this island, we were hijacked and we landed on this island, and they faked like phone documents and text messages and things like that, and unfortunately caused this one particular wife a lot of anguish and pain, because she legitimately believed that her husband was still alive, and it was actually just some horrible troll on the internet making this up.
Well, that's the internet for you.
Yep.
Yeah. People on the internet are pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I've definitely been catfished by a Malaysian airliner pilot, so
Same.
So-
it's happened to all of us.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at his mental health too, though. Think that's like the Vegas shooter. They had nothing on him. Like, no.
That's
no
right.
backstory, no, like.
Maybe this pilot had something held over his head. If he didn't do this, his family would suffer. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like with the Egypt Air flight, where the pilot committed suicide and murder. That was actually in retribution, because his company had said had basically claimed that he had been sexually assaulting his coworkers, and he believed that he claimed that that was not true, that he hadn't done it, things like that. And so in order to get back at his company, he decided to crash his plane in the Atlantic.
#MeToo.
Hashtag you too can enjoy today's unofficial sponsor, Collectivo Coffee. If you like the darkest nut that you can possibly get in your mouth, try these dark black beans. Collectivo Coffee is a coffee shop. Looks like, I don't know where they're located at, but they've been in Wisconsin for a while. Milwaukee actually is what it looks like. And today we drink a classic French roast from Collectivo called Velo, and here is a description. Fans of dark roast, listen up. Velo is our version of the classic French roast created just for you. Dark roasted organic fair trade coffees from Central America and Indonesia. Hey, that's on theme.
Oh yeah.
Come together in this smoky, full-bodied blend with flavors of dark chocolate and licorice. A rewarding coffee for those who want a little roast in their lives.
What a seamless transition and just a beautiful, shameless plug.
I love dark flavors penetrating
Beautiful
my
plug
mouth.
from a beautiful boy.
That's right.
Yeah, plug your holes with these beans. They're delicious.
All right,
Sponsor us, please.
heading back over to the horrible tragedy that we're talking about tonight. Is something that people like to bring up when discussing this crash is the captain's flight simulators that he had at home. There were a number of files that he had deleted, and that the FBI then
Reconstructed.
yes, basically essentially reconstructed from those deleted files, where he was flying a similar route to the actual flight path of MH370, where he took off from Malaysia and flew out through the Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia, and then turned south and flew off into the Indian Ocean. His final destination that was plotted in the flight simulator was an air station in Antarctica, but with that fuel load, and with the maximum fuel load of 777, that just wouldn't be possible. So eventually, before he even got to his destination, he would have crashed. So that's definitely, to me, somewhat of a smoking gun, and very suspicious that he did have those flight simulators. Didn't match the flight path perfectly, so which makes some people think like, oh, it's nothing harmless. He just wanted to fly to Antarctica. But it seems a little too much of a coincidence.
Pretty close to what
me.
actually happened, I guess.
Yeah.
Some red flags there.
So I don't know.
I actually have a couple of questions here that I'm gonna do since we get to the end here. My first question is, so the passengers' cell phones. I was reading that a couple of the families had tried to get a hold of the people on the plane while it was flying. 'Cause obviously, after an hour of not being at your land, you're gonna get panicked. So the family members reported that instead of going straight to voicemail, which is what would happen if their phone was off, or airplane mode, or what have you, the phones wouldn't have kept ringing to reach them. And all the family members were reporting that none of theirs went straight to voicemail. They had their phones on, which to me I think that maybe people were panicking and had turned their phones back on if they were, even like we said earlier, conscious. But also just in general, like why, I don't know, it just seems like a red flag there that their phones didn't go straight to voicemail.
Yeah, that's a great point that, kind of gives you that goosebump, skin crawl kind of thing. Where like, oh my God, these phones were still ringing. They were still turned on. They were still, contacting, satellites or, phone towers or what have you.
Something was working.
Yeah, so,
It's just, who knows? It's
who
just,
knows?
It's
You just gotta kind of have to shrug at it, but it's scary to think about.
Well, what could have happened, and I know this because I'm the retard who doesn't turn his phone off when he flies. Some people are just lazy. I mean, they could have just forgot to. They could have just not cared. And I mean, the second, say he depressurized it and they did lose consciousness, even though they have those masks, I mean, if they didn't turn their phone off, they're not going to be able to turn it off if they're asleep.
Yeah. I'm sure they were just unconscious and phones were left on, and whatever. Just, something to ponder.
They were just sitting helplessly in the air awaiting their death.
Yeah, they might. If they were unconscious, they had no idea. They were just on a path straight to death.
Well, is the cabin pressurization different from the cockpit?
Yeah, the cockpit has their own oxygen system.
Well, that would make sense. But what would happen to the co-pilot? Why wouldn't the co-pilot do anything as well?
That's something that we really can't answer. We just don't have enough information. Maybe like with the Germanwings flight where the co-pilot killed everyone on board, he waited until his pilot got up to go to the bathroom and then locked him out.
Yeah.
So it could have been a similar situation where pilot waits for the co-pilot to go to the bathroom or get a coffee or whatever, and locks him out of the cockpit.
Yeah, never know. I also wanted to know, how big is the search area currently, and is it at all possible that ocean currents could have moved this plane over the past 4 years from where it originally sunk to a totally different spot, maybe 100 miles from where they're looking now,
Oh yeah.
or more.
I mean, they've searched over like 80,000 square kilometers of ocean.
Okay.
A massive, massive area. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there were 2 cyclones during that week where they were repositioning their search efforts. Who really knows how far this thing could have drifted?
Yeah, could have been taken to the other side of the world, looking on the wrong side. Also, how likely do all of you think hijacking was on this particular flight?
I'd say probably 30%. Or maybe a little bit more, because there just wasn't that big of a trail on the pilot side. They didn't really have a reason to do what they did.
To me, the big thing was when you talked about the co-pilot that had a history of letting people in the cockpit.
Right.
So maybe, if there was some sort of like ISIS or terrorist organization hijack, maybe it was a similar situation where the co-pilot might have let them into the cockpit, and then they either forcefully got the pilot and the co-pilot out and then depressurized, or I don't know what, but
if it was a hijacking, terrorists liked they liked their work to be known. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, you got a good point
Exactly.
there.
No one claimed this.
Yeah.
no
And
terrorist organization.
in fact, they made an effort to hide what happened.
to keep
So
it
Exactly.
if nobody claimed it and nobody hid it, I mean, unless somebody just hated everybody on board and just decided to do it right then, I think, yeah, it's maybe a little bit less than 30%, but I'd give it a 30% rating.
If this was a plan by a terrorist organization, we would have known where this plane had crashed, and they would have made it very well known that they did it and they were behind it.
I agree.
But with this, we literally have no answers. We have no idea what caused it or who did it. You really just have our theories.
Quite
what
a
about
mystery.
maybe with you said there's the Iranian 2 people that were formed politics, or what if
They were
The fake passport.
they were refugees.
what if the pilot somehow landed the plane where he could escape and got on a life raft? Maybe Iranian Navy or Air Force came and found his location. He was in with them, got a massive payout, and just
That is
hiding.
believable.
That's on my top of the list for motives. Because like we said before, this guy seemed to have a perfectly clean record, no history of mental illness, no financial troubles, none of that. So I'm thinking that it's possible that somebody might have just had something over his head that kind of made him do this and kept it hush hush. Who knows? Maybe it could have something to do with those fake passport passengers or not. Again, this whole thing is you never know. But
Conjecture.
it's all speculation.
My belief is that this was entirely the captain's decision and his direct actions to take this plane and hide it in the far reaches of the earth where no one will ever find it. And taking not only his life, but everyone else on board.
What we need to do is find his brain and extract the memories.
That's right.
But if the pilot wanted to die with, wouldn't you think he would have nosedived or tried to kill himself on impact?
Well, maybe
'Cause
he
would've-
wasn't violent towards other people. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to hurt everybody on board the same way.
But if he lands that way, he's gonna have to
Starved to death.
that, or he's gonna have to shoot himself. He's gonna drown himself.
Yeah, you never know. Interesting.
More questions that
Yeah.
can't be answered.
There's gonna be more questions for years to come until I don't even know. Are we ever gonna figure this out? Is it something? I mean, the truth's out there somewhere.
Maybe, just maybe, he hit a cyclone and he is now in the land of the lost.
Yeah.
That's a really old show for all the older people watching.
It's a Will Ferrell movie.
No, it's a TV show. You don't talk about that.
One of the truly sad things that I'll kind of leave off on this is that the search is over. The Malaysian government called off the search on behalf of the coalition looking for them, China, America, etc. So all government organizations are no longer looking for it. And now a company called Ocean Infinity did begin their own search, but they have now since stopped. So
Why did they stop? Did it just Hopeless.
They searched where they thought it was going to be, and they found nothing.
Right. Simple enough.
So they really just don't know where it is now. They searched everywhere. They thought it was going to be
it. Drain the ocean.
I,
We need plane sniffing dolphins.
James Cameron.
Sniffing.
Get James
We need
Cameron
to
down
get
there.
James
Cameron.
Yeah, there we go.
James Cameron, if you're listening right now, you need to find this plane.
We know
Also
you've been down
sponsors.
deep enough. Just go a little bit deeper.
Set the bar
Get in
even
there,
higher.
bud.
But you know, I think one day we will eventually find this jet.
And one day we'll cure
It's
cancer.
well, I mean,
That's a whole different.
That's a
That's a
different
different.
conspiracy
it's the
there.
human need and desire to solve mysteries and to seek closure. So it's really not a matter of if, but more of when.
Kind of the whole reason we're doing this podcast.
Exactly.
Well, if you liked us debating and talking about speculating on this flight, our next episode is actually going to be a little bit more geared towards cryptids, where we are going to start talking about this Wisconsin cryptid, local cryptid called the Dogman, and Beal actually here, Brett actually knows a little bit more about that.
On
And,
I actually like.
find his Facebook, find him on Instagram.
I grew up with this legend, so my dad and my uncle would always talk about it because it is a Wisconsin and a Michigan folklore. So it's quite interesting. I think before we record this next one, we're actually going to try to go to where it's from.
Definitely.
See,
Scope it out.
scope it out, see if we can find anything ourselves.
Maybe
I'm
make some
trying to.
Dogman jerky.
I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, look at the police cases, and I hope that we'll have a good story for you next time.
Hope we get to see something.
We might have to wait a little bit on that because maybe he hibernates in the winter.
But there has been sightings in the winter.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's got fur. He's fine.
That's right.
If you look at the
Just like
picture
us.
that was taken in 2018, it was in January,
Ooh.
and there's snow on the ground.
Mm.
Oh. But if you would like to hear more about creepy stories such as cryptids, conspiracy theories, aliens, anything paranormal or spooky, tune in for our next episode of Coffee Talk Conspiracy. And I'm your reptilian overlord Justin signing off.
Oh shit! I don't have an outro. I'm Brett.
The Booty Bandit Bennett, signing out.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, remember, the truth is out there.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.